Remember that movie Independence Day where you had the idiots looking up into the lights? Unbelievable.
Probably too hard. And it's not charging. It's down to one bar on the front of the battery. And when I stick it into the charger, both the green and the red are blinking. And it refuses to charge. It's not going anywhere. Well, it's a Saturday evening. And I just finished watching a motocross race on Mav TV. It's one of those cable TV type things. And it's actually kind of funny because the guy that everybody thinks is sort of Superman in AMA motocross is just a normal guy. You know, he's a human. He's very good at what he does, but has good days and bad days. And today was one of his bad days. And people will read all kinds of things into the fact the guy had a bad day. But it makes you think about how people perceive and how they make judgment and how they make decisions based on what they see on YouTube. And then for whatever reason, it made me start thinking about some of the lesser known saws, or the ones that have lesser exposure that I spent time with this last year. And I started piling them up and going, wow, there's a lot of saws I've looked at. And one of the reasons I get other people to run them is I just don't have time to put on the saws to the point where I can make really, really good assessments. But there are a few that I've used enough to know that I can actually say, you know something, I know how they're going to act over a period of time. This little Makita I got early this year, a little bit dirty right now. It's proven to be one of those saws that, yeah, I can pretty much count on it. It does what it does. It's not going to win any races. It's not meant to. It's just meant to be a saw that you pull on, starts, and does some work, right? And it's been sitting for a couple weeks in the back of the truck, so I'm kind of curious. It's got a little bit of gas in it. Let's just see how easy it is to start, because this is going to roll into the real subject matter that I'm trying to get to. And with this saw here, I've got a primer bulb, so it helps things. Kind of pump on that. We've been here before, right? And it has a choke on. And then it has a spring assist start right here. And you just saw one of the reasons I think this is a absolute winner of a saw, because I can pull it out of the back of the truck, and even though it's been sitting for a little bit, just a couple of pulls, it starts. And while it may not win any races, with a decent chain you can get a fair amount of work done. But here's what's most important, is this saw performs well. And in the performance envelope that it was designed for, it does a very nice job, and it does it every time, consistently. It's a saw that you can actually depend on. And I would choose a saw like this Makita over a lot of the other saws out there that may be flashier and even more expensive from other brand names. It works well all the time, consistently. It's something I can depend on. And I want to make that kind of a theme. Okay, this little saw right here, it's another one, been sitting in the truck. I don't know if it has gas or not. $100, right? No, it probably doesn't have much gas. Nope, it's empty. Why is it empty? Because it gets used. Again, it's a saw that's not going to win any races and not going to impress anybody at a get-together, and you can't put on a video having it just blast through logs making cookies and be impressed. But it's a saw that works. works well for what it is. It's $100. What do you expect for $100? You know what I'm saying? So it's a saw that I had to do a little bit of debug, but for a $100 saw, that's what I expected. But again, the common theme is when I want to go out and get some work done, like today, well, can I drag it out of the truck, not do research and development, and just start easily and get work done with it? And that's what we're going to, there you go, now we have some gas. This one here, you have to remember to turn it on. It has a choke. Let's see if it starts. There you go. There's your answer. Here's a saw that may not have spectacular performance, and I'm sure you can buy a lot of top handle saws that have a lot more power. If you remember, I had to modify the way it holds the bar a little bit, but yet again, I pulled this thing out of the truck, put a little bit of gas in it, fired up, and it runs, and it has done that consistently. And where I'm going with this is, that to me is the definition of a well sorted out good saw. How about this one? This is kind of new, so I don't really have enough time on the John Cutter 5800 in order to make that kind of assessment. But I do have some first impressions, and my first impressions on this saw are actually pretty good. It's got a little tiny bit of gas, enough to prove the point here. Yet again, you go out into the woods, pull it out of your truck, turn it on, pull the choke, does it start? Kind of. So this is beginning to fall to the other side where, yeah, I got it fired and it runs pretty good for the $110 it costs to have this saw delivered to your door. I'm beginning to trend, and this is a favorable experience with this John Cutter G5800, right? But I don't know. Where I've got a couple of months on this one here, I kind of do know, because I've got enough time on it to know that it's fairly predictable. Has not let me down yet. And on both the little top handle John Cutter and the Makita, I won't know for sure until I get through a winter. Same with this one. But those two are trending into the positive territory. Now, if you guys were paying attention to my last video, I had made some commentary about how the saws I don't particularly like don't end up on the channel. Let's see if this one starts. Got a little time on it. Needs a little bit more gas. And I've spent a lot of time in trying to tweak and tune this saw. Some of it was on video last year. It's got a blue Big Brother, which absolutely is a winner in my mind. Let's see if it starts. I guess this one's not going to start today, is it? And that, by the way, is not atypical of my experience with this particular saw. This one would be the G372xt. I have never been able to make it run well, and I always end up having little things like that go wrong with it. So this would be one of those saws that, well, you're not going to see very much on the channel. And I tried. I really tried. Now we're into this one right here. There was a fair amount of pressure for me to get this saw and see what I think about it and come up with some level of commentary and possibly some things to do to make it better. Let's see how it starts. I am going to spend some time in this video trying to get some tweak and tune on this one. I'm going to use it some today too. It's got a little bit of gas, not enough to do a job, so we will put more. Choke on, no primer. That's a good sign. That's not bad, see? Now, since you've seen that saw last, I did in fact richen up the low speed, and that was to try to make it a little more responsive, the bottom end. And I leaned out the top end a little bit. So I think what we're going to do right now is put it on the tack. So let me review if you hadn't seen the last video. I took it out of the box. It had a problem with the handle, so I replaced it with an OEM handle. Now I sent a nasty gram to Farmertec, and they responded with that must be an anomaly because they have checked every other one of these saws they have in their inventory, and it doesn't have that sticky throttle scenario that mine did, so I will take them at their word. But in my case, I had to replace the handle because as it came out of the box, if you opened up the throttle and released it, it would not return to idle. It was sort of stuck in there. And I don't know if it's the handle or the cable. I don't know if I have time to really investigate it. And in order to get some video time, I just put another handle on it so we can get it to run. Now, as compared to the G372, that was a low-cost version. That one was more like this John Cutter, where pretty much out of the box it worked pretty well. And then I got the G372xt last winter, and if you watch my videos, I struggled with that and never really did get it right. I got it to where it was usable, and I used it for a month or two doing work around the farm. But very quickly, when given the choice to run that and some of the other saws in inventory, got put on the back burner. I'm going to stick with this XT version, and you're going to say why. Because the G372, the earlier version, or the lower cost version, I didn't have to mess with. Well, there's actually two reasons. One is because there's a lot of people who are interested in this particular saw. But second, there's a few parts of this saw that I'm interested in. One, by this one having a set of cases that are, by implication, handle an X-Torq top end, which I don't know for sure yet. I need to stress that. That might be a source of low-cost cases that bring some of those X-Torqs back to life. But the other piece is the high top cover and filter. That's of interest. And the carburetor filter holder as well. One of my favorite builds is the blend, what I think is the better part of an X-Torq to an original edition style saw, whether it comes from the Pacific Rim or from Europe, it doesn't matter. And if I start with this saw, carburetor seems to work okay, and it stays working okay. The air filter, taller cover, stuff like that. Maybe I can put a better original edition cylinder on this saw and come up with a better saw. Also, the reason why I'm sticking with this saw is because it has progressively run better, and in my mind, unlike some of the other ones which you just can't get to run at all, it's trying to be successful, if that makes any sense, and I think it needs a chance, like I said at the end of the last video. Before I get into the next phase, I just want to stress something. If you go online and you look at the forums, there is so much focus on how fast is it cut through a log compared to another saw. And over the years, I've been guilty of posting a fair amount of cut times as well. That's important, I suppose. Anymore for me, if a saw works well, I couldn't care less if it's a half a second or even 2 seconds slower in a test log. It doesn't matter. What really matters is when I drag this thing out into the brush or the woods and I start cutting, it works well, you know. For the 99% of people out there who need a saw, not for entertainment, but for cutting firewood and making a living and cleaning up the yard, cleaning up the farm and things like that, a better working saw is so much more important than an extra second in a log to me. Well, we got a little work to do because it's running just a little bit too fat now on the bottom. Let me lean it back out again just a little bit. And this carburetor does, in fact, have adjusting screws, not a special wrench, and that is a huge plus to me. Leans it out a little bit. Maybe better. Let's go with that and let it break in like that for a little bit. I think there's a small tree right down there I want to take out, and there's a much larger one that I'm going to take out tomorrow. But this one right here will get some run time on it, and we'll see if it begins to stabilize like the XP did. Okay, what you're beginning to see now, how a saw operates. Where it's stalled like that, I don't like saw stalling, so I need to develop the tune a little bit for that. And if you notice that the lower end of the RPM range, the idle kind of raises and lowers, I'm going to try fattening it up a little bit, and then we'll continue. What I've been doing this last half hour or so is trying to get a sense on its running characteristics. Obviously, the first and most important is how easy is it to get it started. The next few characteristics are just as important. And one is throttle response. And in addition to just the throttle response when it first starts up, after it's been running for a little bit and you let it sit down and idle, the throttle response after a period of time at idle is just as important. And if it stalls, then that means you have to restart, and that begins to add to the pain in the neck factor. But if you do shut it off, how easy is it to restart? So you have those kind of characteristics that I'm looking for. And that to me is what determines if a saw is fun to run, nice to run, or is it just a pain? What's operating that saw like? Is it easy? Is it fun? And I can tell you in the beginning, if you have a hot saw, it's fun because there's all kinds of power and there's a wow factor. But that wow factor goes away after, say, 4 or 5 months of using the saw. And then you're back to, is it easy to run? Does it start easy? Does it stop? Is it a pain in the neck? You know, what's it like to live with? This saw right here, this is the X-Torq version from Farmertec. Said that a couple times. the title of the video is going to be the same. And while it's not really running well in my mind, it makes good power. You know, it started, but it does stall and it does burble and bog. By the way, that's a characteristic of the OEM X-Torques as well. So this poor saw, the X-Torq from Farmertec, is starting out with 2 strikes because it's modeled after a saw that I don't think runs very well. You know, you can make them run good, you can make them strong, but until they got past like 2016, 2017, the OEM version of that saw was, in my mind, really wasn't a good running saw. And the kind of things they change are things like the cutouts and the throttle plates. I mean, they have engineers that spend a lot of time on how the saw runs and how it operates. And the OEMs do that. And when they do copies like that, I'm not sure they have the manpower or even the opportunity to do that kind of development. So it doesn't surprise me that the copy version of an X-Torq has got some of the same issues that the original does. But the good news is it's not so far out of whack. I think that saw's got some power and some potential, so I think it's worth trying to work it out and debug it. And then yet again, as I started the video, there's 2 other missions I have for that particular build where it may morph into something completely different. And right now, because the cases I think are a little bit better than just the G372, and it has a larger carburetor that an X-Torq has than the G372xt, those 2 pieces are telling me that of the 3 saws, even though I like the G372 as it comes out of the box, if I want to pick one to build and modify, I might start with that one right there. So right now, that saw has a characteristic I'm familiar with. When you let it idle for a little bit, it's like the fuel will pool up somewhere in the intake, and when you first hit the throttle, it'll stall. Now that's actually not uncommon with the OEM X-Torq, and this one is displaying the same characteristic. And the way you get around that is you kind of lean out the low side and then cover it up with a little bit more air screw. Alright, that's a little bit too much, too lean. I'm going to try to back down the idle screw a little bit and get a little bit more mixture. Go figure. I guess this saw is not going to pass the run test today, is it? I don't know what happened to that saw. Well, I've made a lot of headway with this saw in terms of how it idles. Let me see if I can show you. I ran out of memory with my main camera. So here, restart. Again on the restart, let me get the camera to where it'll record some of that maybe. So that's beginning to get into a saw that I can deal with. And I may have caught it before, but now that I've got the no load where it's up in the high 12s, it's actually making good power too. I think it would give the stock one a run for its money now, whereas where it was as it came out of the box, it didn't have a prayer. So anyway, that's the progress report, part 2, in tweak and tune and developing the XT, but more importantly, trying to define the definition of a good running saw and trying to explain why, to me, that's a higher priority than how fast it cuts cookies in a test log. You know what I'm saying? Nothing ticks me off more than setting a saw down and then trying to get it started, it won't fire up. And right behind that is working with a saw and setting it down and having it stall. Those are the kind of things that just absolutely turn me off. I don't care how fast a saw is. When it doesn't run well and operate well, it's not a good saw for me. Talk to you later. Bye for now. I hope you get the point. Oh, look at that. We've got a pair of beavers in this pond. That is awesome. Let me see if I can zoom up on them. I haven't seen beavers in here in a couple of years. That is really, really, really good news to see this dam come back around.